So welcome to another class in the subject Environmental Engineering 1, Module 2. So in the previous class we discussed what are the various physical characteristics of water as well as the physical analysis of water. Today we'll be discussing what are the various chemical characteristics of water and the chemical analysis of water. So chemical analysis of water actually involves various tests that are conducted for determining the total solids, the hardness, pH value, chlorides, iron and manganese, that is a metal contents, then dissolved gases, etc. So what do you mean by total solids and suspended solids? So total solids are considered to be the sum of the dissolved as well as the suspended solids in a given sample of water. So we know that in any water source there may be a lot of debris or solid matter that is present, and this may be either in the dissolved state or it can actually be it can also be in a suspended state. So total solids is actually a sum of the dissolved as well as the suspended solids that are present in a given sample of water. And the dissolved solids which usually predominate is the dissolved solids are the one which predominates the suspended solids, and it mainly consists of inorganic salt, small amounts of organic matter as well as dissolved gases, and the suspended solids contains much of the organic matter. And we also can say that any increase thereof of the suspended solids will tend to increase the degree of pollution in the water. Now how will we determine the total solids, suspended solids and dissolved solids in water? So in order to determine the total solids in a given sample of water, we have to firstly weigh the given sample of water, and then we have to evaporate the water, and after that again we have to weigh the residue. So from the difference we can find out what is the amount of total solids that are present in the given sample. And then when it comes to determination of the suspended solids, in this case the total suspended solids present in water is determined by filtering the water sample and then weighing the residue that is left on the filter paper. So we know what is the total solid, what is the dissolved amount of dissolved solids, suspended solids. So from this, by knowing the total solids as well as the total suspended solids, we can find out what is the amount of dissolved solids. So this can be obtained by finding the difference between the total solids and the suspended solids. So when it comes to all these parameters that we mentioned here, each of these parameters have a specific value or a permissible limit, beyond which what happens is, if it is in excess of the permissible limit, then we can say that the water is unfit for drinking. So when it comes to total solids, the permissible limit of total solids in any given sample of water is 500 parts per million or 500 milligrams per liter. So when the value exceeds this, we can say that the water is unfit for drinking. So only if the value of the total solids that are present in a given sample of water is within 500 parts per million, the water is fit for drinking, or we can say the water is potable. Coming to the next characteristics, that is pH value. So pH, you all are familiar with this term pH. It actually indicates the logarithm of the reciprocal of the hydrogen ion concentration that is present in water, and it actually indicates whether the sample is acidic or alkalinity. So it is an indication, or it is an indicator of the acidity or alkalinity of the water. And a higher value of pH means that is there is lower hydrogen concentration, and then we can say it is alkaline. And if the value of pH is low, it indicates higher hydrogen concentration, and thus we can say it is acidic. So when it comes to pure water, the value of pH is around 7, and so if it is greater than 7, we can say that it is alkaline, and if it is lesser than 7, we say it is acidic. And also we know that whenever the acidity or alkalinity of water is high, we will not prefer it for drinking. So the permissible limit for public water supply for pH is between 6.6 to 8.5. So if the value of pH is between 6.6 and 8.5 we can say the water is consumable. Lower or higher values of pH indicates, like I said, it is acidic or it may be alkaline. So such samples of water are not fit for consumption or for drinking purpose. And there are various methods by which you can determine the pH of a given sample of water. So it may be determined by using a potentiometer or also by using color indicators. So potentiometer actually measures the potential exerted by the hydrogen ion, and also it indicates its concentration. So that is what I told you here. So lower hydrogen concentration means it is alkaline, and higher means it is acidic. And when it comes to a color indicator, so what we do is we will add colors to water, and the color produced the color that is produced will be compared with the standard color of known pH values. So by comparing the colors, we will have a color chart. So for different colors, the pH value will be already given in the chart, and by adding some colors to water, or we can just compare it with this standard chart of colors, and from this we can find out what is the pH value of the given sample of water. Now coming to the next characteristics, that is hardness. So it is actually a characteristic of water which prevents the formation of lather or foam when it is mixed with soap. So when when we say that water forms lesser lather when soap is added to it, then we can say the water is hard. So it actually when water is hard, it prevents the formation of lather, or when we know that when soap is mixed with water, what happens is there will be formation of lather. So this when there is lesser formation of lather, we can say that the water is harder, and mainly this is caused by the presence of chlorides and sulfates of calcium and magnesium. So the effects of hardness includes greater consumption of soap, also scaling in the case of boilers. Then it can lead to corrosion and incrustation of pipelines. So if hard water is carried through pipelines, what happens is it leads to corrosion and incrustation. And also cooking, when you cook food with hard water, it actually will be tasteless. So types of hardness, there are two types. One is temporary hardness and the other one is a permanent hardness. So a temporary hardness is also known as carbonate hardness, and permanent hardness is also called as non-carbonate hardness. So carbonate hardness is actually due to the presence of carbonates and bicarbonates of calcium and magnesium, and this is temporary because it can be easily removed just by boiling or by adding lime, whereas non-carbonate hardness, that is permanent hardness, is due to the presence of sulfates and chlorates of calcium and magnesium, and it cannot be easily removed just by simple boiling, and hence we use various other methods, or methods like softening methods, in order to remove the permanent hardness. So I am sure you would have studied hardness in your engineering chemistry paper, so I am not going into detail for this topic. So coming to the measurements of hardness. So hardness is defined as, like I told you, as the calcium carbonate equivalent of calcium and magnesium ion that are present in water. And here again it is measured, or it is expressed in milligrams per liter. So up to 75 parts per million, for a hardness value up to 75 parts per million, we can say the water is soft water, and between 75 and 200 parts per million, we can say it is moderately hard, and for hardness value above 200, we can say the water is hard. And permissible limits for boiler feed water and for efficient cloth washing, the hardness should be less than 75 parts per million, that is, it should be soft water. And for public supply, it can be between the range 75 to 115 parts per million. Now coming to the next characteristic, that is chloride content. So here again, chlorides are present in water in various forms for example in the form of sodium chloride. So sodium chloride, you know, NaCl, that is common salt, and it may be due to leaching of the marine sediments or even pollution from marine water or sea water, then industrial and domestic waste, etc. And the main or the permissible limit of chlorides in given sample of water or the water that is to be used for public use should not exceed 250 milligrams per liter. And chloride content in a given sample of water can be determined by titrating it with silver nitrate solution using potassium chromate as the indicator. So the permissible limit for chloride contents in drinking water, it should not exceed 250 milligrams per liter. Coming to the next, that is nitrogen content. So whenever nitrogen is present in water, it is an indication of presence of organic matter in water, and there are various forms in which nitrogen can exist in water, and that they are in the form of free ammonia or ammonium nitrogen, or maybe in the albuminoid or organic nitrogen, or it may be present in the form of nitrates and nitrites. So free ammonia means it indicates the first stage of decomposition of organic matter. So presence of ammonia in water, nitrogen in water is actually an indication of the presence of organic matter in water. So when free ammonia is present, it is actually an indication of the first stage of decomposition of the organic matter. So whenever there is organic matter present in water, it starts decomposing. So during this decomposition process, it will release free ammonia, and it actually indicates fresh pollution, or recently the water has been polluted. And the permissible limit for potable water for free ammonia is it should not exceed 0.15 milligrams per liter. And there are various methods by which we can determine the amount of free ammonia. It may be measured by simply boiling the water, and just measuring the amount of ammonia gas that is liberated by distillation process. And albuminoid nitrogen, it indicates the quantity of nitrogen in the form of undecomposed organic matter. So for potable water, this value of albuminoid nitrogen should not exceed 0.3 milligrams per liter. And again, this is determined by boiling water, and the water is boiled with potassium permanganate, and then measuring the amount of ammonia gas that is released. Now coming to nitrates, the presence of nitrates indicates the presence of partly decomposed, that is, when organic matter starts decomposition, it can be fully or partly decomposed. So partly decomposed means it is not fully oxidized. So when the organic matter is not fully oxidized, then nitrites will be formed. So it is very dangerous, and the permissible limit is nil. So nitrites should not be present in drinking water, and this can be measured by matching the color, and the color is developed by adding sulfonic acid and naphthamine into the water. So by various chemical analysis, we can determine the presence of nitrites in given sample of water. And when it comes to nitrates, here it indicates the presence of fully oxidized organic matter. So this will indicate the pollution is quite old, or it is not recent pollution, the pollution is quite old. And the permissible limit of nitrates in given sample of water is 45 milligrams per liter. And there is a condition called hemoglobinemia, that is also called as blue baby disease. So this is actually caused due to the presence of excess nitrates. Again, this is also measured by color matching method, and the color is developed by adding a phenol disulfonic acid and potassium hydroxide. Now coming to the metal contents and other chemical substances that are likely to be present in water. So presence of metals and any other chemical substance in excess can cause harmful effect when it is consumed. So metal and other substances are measured by color matching methods with different indicators. So we'll see each of them. So firstly, iron and manganese. So the permissible limit of iron in water on drinking water is less than 0.3 parts per million, and the permissible limit of manganese is less than 0.05 parts per million. So whenever iron and manganese are present in excess, it causes discoloration of the clothes, as well as the incrustation of the pipes. Next is copper. So when it comes to copper, the permissible limit is between 1 to 3 parts per million, and the effect, or when it is in excess, it affects the human lungs as well as the respiratory organs. And when it comes to sulfate, the permissible limit is less than 250 parts per million, and if it is in excess or above the permissible limit, it causes laxative effect on the human body and also may lead to diarrhea. Coming to fluorides, the permissible limit of fluorides in drinking water is between 1 parts per million and 1.5 part per million, and if fluoride is less than 1 parts per million, it can cause formation of fewer cavities in the teeth. There may be lesser cavities, and if it is greater than 1.5 parts per million, it causes a situation which we call it as fluorosis, dental fluorosis. So it is the discoloration of the tooth will become yellowish in color, or it may lead to mottling of the tooth and even the deformation of the bones. So it should be between 1 part per million or 1.5 parts per million. So this is the permissible limit for fluorides in water. And now coming to the dissolved gases. So various gases may be dissolved in the dissolved form in a given sample of water. So we already discussed nitrogen. So nitrogen actually indicates the presence of organic matter, and when it comes to hydrogen sulfide, if nitrogen is present in water, that is not fit for, then we can say the water is not fit for drinking. Now coming to hydrogen sulfide, if hydrogen sulfide is present in drinking water, it gives a bad taste, and also there will be a obnoxious odor when hydrogen sulfide is present. And when carbon dioxide is present, it indicates the biological activity, and again this also imparts a bad taste and odor, and it can also lead to corrosion of the pipes. So a permissible limit for a potable water for dissolved oxygen, it is 5 to 10 parts per million. So dissolved oxygen is actually the amount of oxygen that is present in dissolved state, and it is consumed by organic matter. So whenever there is dissolved oxygen is present in water, if there is again organic matter in water, in order to decompose, for the decomposition process, the dissolved oxygen will be consumed by the organic matter. So dissolved oxygen less than its saturation level actually indicates that there is presence of organic matter and the water is polluted. Now coming to biological oxygen demand. So biological oxygen demand, it is the amount of the oxygen that is consumed by the organic matter for getting oxidized or decomposed. So it may be measured by various means. One of the method is by dilution method, in which the raw water will be mixed with pure water that is saturated with a known quantity of dissolved oxygen. Firstly, we will determine the dissolved oxygen, and then this will be incubated for 5 days in an incubator at 20 degrees Celsius, and then the difference between the original oxygen content and then the residual oxygen that is left after incubation, that will indicate the oxygen that is consumed by the organic matter. Then we can calculate BOD by using the formulae. BOD is equal to the loss of oxygen into dilution factor, and the permissible limit for BOD for safe drinking water must be nil. So the water should not have BOD. There should be no biological oxygen demand when it comes to drinking water. So all these analysis will be done in the environmental engineering lab. So the procedure shall be shared to you later on. So these are the various chemical characteristics of water.